Which high school did you say you attended?
I ended up going to Bourbon Day High School, which was a small Catholic high school. So I went to public school up until that point. And then when I got to high school, I think my mother just really wanted to make sure academically that I was on the most solid foundation that I could be. So she sent me to a small Catholic high school. And even though we weren't Catholic, it was known for its academics. And when I say small, my graduating class was literally 50 people, and the entire school was 200 people. So it was a school that was known for basketball, but it was also known for academics because a lot of the students, the percentage of students that graduated there, and it was an all boys school. So it also kept you focused a lot. You didn't have anything else to think about but academics. So going there, I think, again, just kind of kept me focused. And the percentage of students that left Bourbon Day High School and went to college was so high. I think it just gave me the best chance of being able to go to an institution of higher learning.
Did you know when you were in high school what you wanted to pursue in college?
I thought I did. I ended up, I said in high school, and I really didn't have an idea, but when I first started, I thought about, maybe I'll be a dentist. And I thought about being a dentist. And that was, one of the things I said, okay, when I go to school, I'll go to school and I'll become a dentist. And then I realized you can't be a dentist if you don't like the sight of blood. So that probably got squashed in about, I don't know, the first week or two of college. And as I sat down and talked about it, but I talked about it with people that were in that field. But I think the other thing is, for me, at least going to Irvine, my sister had gone to Irvine and she was 3 years ahead of me. So she had recruited not only myself, but she recruited, there were probably about 4 of us, I think, 4 or 5 of us that all attended the same church growing up since we were under 10 years old. And we all had gone to the same church and all of us ended up going to UC Irvine. My sister was the first one there. And there was myself and I think 2 people were actually in my class and there was another person behind me. So we all ended up following her to UC Irvine. And that was part of the path, that we went to go there. And the funny story, if there's one, is that when I think it was a junior in high school, my church had a bike-a-thon from Compton, California to Irvine. And my sister was a student there. So we raised money by having people sponsor us. And we literally rode a bike on Friday up from Compton to Irvine. And that distance is probably, I don't know, I'm guessing about 30 plus miles or so. And so we all got on our bikes and the pastor got in his car, put on his flashers, and we all rode to Irvine. I think it was Saturday morning, actually. We got up early Saturday and rode to Irvine, spent the night and rode back on Sunday. And it was probably one of the most memorable experiences. Even though I had been to Irvine because my sister was a student there, it was also a memorable experience because then I got a chance to go up and not just visit for a little bit, but stay the night and go with a bunch of my peers. And so, that was part of high school, but probably one of the most memorable experiences there was a combination actually of high school and then, and going to the UC Irvine campus.
That's pretty awesome. A bike-a-thon to UCI.
Exactly.
I would have never guessed that would happen. Very impressed that you all biked all the way here. Can you tell me what were your first impressions of UCI? You mentioned that, you had visited prior to the overnight trip with the bike-a-thon because your sister attended. What were some of your if you think about the first time you stepped on UCI campus, what did you think about it?
I thought it was a pretty place. I mean, it was just so wide open. And one of the things I think that I thought about is, not only how beautiful it was, but I also looked at it and said, you can go away from home at 18 and, not report to parents and things like that. So that was one of my first thoughts, to be honest about it. And then I looked at just the relationship that I saw my sister had with some of her peers. And I remember one of the first events I attended and I was either a sophomore or a junior in high school, I attended a concert that was put on by the UCI Black Gospel Choir, and it was sensational. It was nothing less than. So I said, and we attended the concert. A few of us went, and then we went and talked to people afterwards, and just to hear the relationship that those people, those students that were Irvine students, had established was just, okay, this is something I could do. The hardest thing was going to be, do you want to be in the same place with your older sister? But yeah, you could live with that.
What did your older sister tell you about Irvine?
She told me it was, it's a good academically, it was good. She also assured me that it was going to be challenging academically, but it would push me to a higher level. She had told me she really liked all the activities, because you were going to school full time, but you still had time for yourself. Even if you worked a part-time job, you still had time to do things, to socialize, to meet people, to get involved in any array of activities. And for her as a student, she was involved in a lot of activities. And so she was able to share a lot of that information with me, with regard to, okay, get involved in this is fun, so on and so forth. So so she kind of assured me that, academically you have to stay on focus, but at the same time too, it is going to be an experience to remember.
Do you think she told you the truth? Do you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. But you know what? She couldn't have, there's no way she could have prepared me academically, So that was probably the biggest rigor for me, and the biggest challenge. But she definitely told me accurately that it was fun. You had the best time, you had the best of everything. So.
Now, what year did you start UCI?
I came in 1977.
All right. And where did you live? And what was the dormitory life like?
I lived in Sierra Dorm, and dorm life was wonderful. At Sierra Dorm, we had a dorm class. And so we were in class, I think it was once a week. I think we were in class one evening a week. It might have been twice a week, but we were in class once a week. And it was, the class was put on by then the Vice Chancellor of Student Affairs, John Whiteley. And so when we got into the class, it was, I can't remember the name of it, but it was a dorm class, and we dealt with a lot of issues. It was different from your standard English, science, history class, because we dealt with a lot of social issues. We dealt with, issues of color, of gender, social consciousness. We learned things like time management. And so it gave us a different skill set, but it also encouraged us to interact with other classmates, other students. And so that was nice, because you got to learn about, here's, your background, but your background may be different from someone else's. And here's 50 something people in a dorm class. And everybody has a different experience. Yet we were in an environment where we got to share it in a kind of a forced way, but good in a forced way, because we had the professor was Dr. Janet Loxley, and it was encouraged, we were strongly encouraged just to share our experience, our values, so on and so forth. So it was a learning experience that you don't traditionally get in a classroom.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the kinds of conversations or topics that you would cover in Sierra during these classes?
Yeah, we talked about, I remember a topic specifically. We talked about, it was called Moral Development Just Community. That's what it was. And so we talked a lot about morals. For example, I remember the story we had about someone that had done a lot of good in the community, so on and so forth, for years and years and years, but yet someone found out that this person had changed their name and they actually had a criminal record. And so what do? Do you put that person back in jail, but they had contributed so much to the community? So we talked about issues of morals. We talked about issues of gender. What are gender differences that we have to deal with? What are your stereotypes and your beliefs about people of the opposite sex? We talked about race. What are your issues with regard to, not issues, but what are your beliefs? What are your thoughts? What are your values? What are your stereotypes with regard to people that are of different races? What about people of different socioeconomic income statuses? What are your beliefs, values, and stereotypes around that? We also talked a lot about just building relationships. And because the professor was a psychologist, we learned things about assertive training, the difference between being assertive, aggressive, and passive. So we learned a lot of skill sets. We also learned, one of the things we learned was managing time, controlling that 24 hours, because oftentimes you say, oh, I just don't have time. But when you realize, when we had to sit and clock our time for, or chart our time, I should say, for I believe it was a week or so, and you look at all the time you had and you're literally charting every minute, you realized, okay, I have a little bit more time than I think, and how, where your time is and where you went and so on and so forth. And so the dorm class to me was invaluable. I love that one.
What were the students like in Sierra? I mean, was it the case that you all chose to be in Sierra, or were you selected to be in Sierra, and who ended up there?
Well, I ended up, I think most of us were selected by the housing administration in conjunction with the person that ran the class. And what they did is they made sure we had a balance of, you had, because it was a co-ed dorm, you had 3 suites of males and 3 suites of females. But then they also made sure we were ethnically diverse. So you had people from African American, Hispanic, white, and Asian cultures. And all that was pretty much taken care of, or the students were selected by the housing. You put down your choice, but the students, some of them were selected by housing for the most part, unless it was just, you selected it and they didn't have anyone else to put in there. But again, I think most of housing did it, but they coordinated what the students, what the demographics of the class was going to look like. And again, they coordinated that with the counseling center.
Did you stay in Sierra past your first year?
Yes and no. And I'll say it's only a freshman dorm. So you can only stay there 1 year. I had such a good experience. I did stay a second year, but I was selected as a staff member because in each suite, there were 6 suites, and in each suite, there were staff members. And so I was selected as a staff member. So I did stay there a second year. And that's why I say yes and no. I was there, but I transitioned from being a student in the class to being a staff member in the class. And so when you're a staff member, you're helping students day in, day out. It's an unpaid position, but it's one where where again, you get to learn, you get to see it from a different side. So I stayed there then. And then my junior year, actually, I was a coordinator of the entire class. So you work directly with the professor in terms of just coordinating the class and putting things together. And the other thing I didn't mention is that one of the things that I thought was also invaluable is that as a freshman, you had to keep a journal, and you had a journal reader. And so you had to write so many pages, whatever it was, but you had to turn in a journal every week of what was going on in your life. And you could talk about almost anything. And they have professionals read it. It wasn't your student. You could have a staff member as your journal reader. You could have the RA in the dorm. There was a professor, and there were about 3 or 4 other people that were staff members or administrators at UC Irvine that could read your class. So they kind of distributed so you could have your journal read, and the person that would read it would make comments because they had already been there. They were at least a freshman. They were at least a staff member. Some of them, again, were staff members. Some of them were coordinators and above, but they would share their experience. So, whatever was on your mind and you're talking about, you felt like you established a rapport or a relationship with that person, and they were able to share their thoughts and opinions. So I thought that was probably one of the most invaluable things that came out of the dorm, was being able to write a journal and sit back and get someone else's feedback on where you're at.
And so that was your junior year?
That was actually my freshman year that we
were... your freshman year, but I'm sorry, let me rephrase my question. I'm trying to count how many years you were at.
So I was in the dorm for 2 years. I lived in
Uh-huh.
the dorm for the 2 years as a freshman, and then as a staff member, you live there. And when you become
Right.
coordinator, you don't live in the dorm. You actually are off
Okay.
campus. Yeah. So I was only there for 2 years, so to speak.
And where did you live the last 2 years?
The last 2 years, my roommate and I, we moved off campus and moved to Tustin, California, in our first
Oh.
apartment ever. First time away from home, other than being in the dorms.
What was that like?
That was fun. That was real different, because then I think at the time I might have been 20 when I moved. So, of course, you think you're grown, you know everything. You get in your own apartment, and that was a blast. I mean, it was just, you're in there, you have to pay your rent, you have to pay bills, so on and so forth. You might work a little bit, but um, it was absolutely wonderful. You're living off campus, you're on your own, and you kind of felt like you had your own house. You kind of felt like you were your parents, how you lived at your parents' home, but this is not your parents' home, this is your home. So, it's my home and my roommate's home. So now we get to, you furnish your own home. It was a unfurnished apartment, so you put in your own furniture and so on and so forth. But that was absolutely fun, and then we had to commute to campus. So that was fun. The responsibility, it felt like just kept increasing year in, year out, because now you don't just get to walk across campus, you have to drive to campus and so on and so forth. So um, staying out, moving out in the dorms was a good thing. I always say it helped with my maturation process.
So you enjoyed living in Tustin.
Absolutely. Yes, definitely.
So far, we've covered a lot of your contributions to residence life
Right.
at UCI, but were there other activities or groups and things that you were a part of?
A lot of them. I probably spent a lot of time, not I probably, I did spend a lot of time involved in activities. I got involved my freshman year. There was no Black Student Union. So I was one of the co-founders of the Black Student Union. It had happened, they had one before and it had just gone dormant or kind of gone by the wayside. So myself and I think there were four other young men, we started the Black Student Union. We realized we needed some women. So we asked two women to be on the board. And there were the seven of us, I believe it was, six or seven of us, and we were on the board. So that was one. I was involved in the Black Student Union from freshman year to graduation.
Oh,
Um,
I'm gonna pause because I want to know
okay.
more. I want to know more about what motivated you to start the Black Student Union, what that process was like, and what your vision was for that organization.
My vision was, I think for me as a Black student, we had, we were so, there were many different groups. We had the science group that was academic based. We had the gospel choir. We had a group called Basic, which was brothers and sisters in Christ. Sororities and fraternities were just getting started. Um, we had a group called, before sororities and fraternities, there was a group called Miss A.M.E, which was for Black women. It was like a sorority, but it didn't have all the uh, the things that a normal sorority has. And the men's group was called the Gentlemen. So they were like fraternities and sororities, but it was just open to anybody, any Black male, any Black female. And we did a lot of activities. So with those, when we looked at all that, the one thing we didn't have, and then we had people that were involved in ASUCI or the student union. But one of the things we didn't have, and I saw it as a freshman, is that we had nothing that brought everybody together. We had nothing that was an umbrella organization that says, hey, even though you're involved in this and your beliefs are this and my beliefs are that, and they may be similar, they may be different, we were all there to help each other. And I think we saw it on the outside when we first came because we had a lot of upperclassmen that helped us as freshmen. When you got in, they told you what classes to take. Your job is not just to get here and think you're the brightest or best student right away, but we want to show you what classes you need to take. There is an adjustment moving away from living at your parents' house to being on your own, and we don't want you to get caught up in partying or doing whatever else too much. So they helped us with classes. And even within the classes, they would tell you, take this professor, don't take that professor. This is the way you want to do it. And you want to establish yourself with a strong GPA starting out. So you give yourself a little bit of time to get adjusted and acclimated. So for me, I think seeing that was great. But again, we didn't have it. There was nothing that brought every single organization together. And so my thought was, and some of the mentors I had as a student, you could see that they didn't care about whether you were in this organization or that organization. You were just a Black student that they wanted to make sure succeeded and did well and graduated. So that's what the BSU did. Our focus was to deal with a wide array of issues from, again, just bringing people together and providing a sense of community and unity amongst Black students across all walks of life. So that was my impetus to start in the BSU.
Thank you for sharing that. We have, a collection in special collections of the Black Student Union, and it's always exciting and interesting to reflect on, where that organization has, come from. To think about also where it's going. So thank you for sharing that information. You mentioned that bringing people together was part of your vision for the Black Student Union. And I wonder if you can tell me a bit more about just the relationship of the people in the Black community at UCI while you attended.
I think the relationship for the most part was really, really good. I mean, we realized we were a small percent, for many of us, we realized we were a small percent of the population at UC Irvine, but we also realized that in unity, there's strength, and united we stand, divided we fall. And so my experience with others and the relationships of people in the Black Student Union and other places was that it gave us an opportunity to kind of share our experiences. We looked out for each other, whether it was walking young ladies to school at night, you had a night class, we'd make sure that there was safety, whether it was helping each other academically, whether it was standing up for whatever we thought was unjust. The Black Student Union, there was also an organization called the Blade newspaper, which was a Black newspaper. There was ASUCI, I forgot the name of the newspaper, but Black students had a Black newspaper at that time. So, again, our focus was really kind of just to share with everyone what was going on and to find our common denominators and not let our differences divide us, but to allow our differences to bring us closer together. And find out what are the issues, I support you on this, you support me on that, but to find out what are the issues together because we're all trying to get through the institution. And also the academic support we provided to each other of, okay, here, let me have you talk to this person, or here's where you go get a good tutor. This is happening, that's happening. So making sure that we all entrusted each other. And for many of us that came through during that time, we grew up in communities like I did, where we were all family. And so this was nothing more but other than an extension of your family. So your family grew from, growing up in a household of 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people to a household of, a couple thousand people. So, you just had a lot more brothers and sisters, and that was the fun of it.
Was there fairly, you said a small population of Black students on campus at that time, or yeah, I don't know if you know the demographics.
I think we represented about 3.5 at the height during my time at Irvine. We might have got up to 4%. So I have to think the school was probably somewhere between 10, 11, maybe 13,000 at its peak. So you figure even if you're at 3% of that, that's about 3,900 people or something like that, if my math is correct. So, it was a small community. No, that's not right. But it was smaller than that. But, whatever the numbers were, we were all, I think, kind of united in one way. are united in the same. So it was a small community, but we were close knit and a tight knit community also.
Earlier, you began to tell me about some of the other activities and things that you were involved in while you attended UCI. I want to invite you to continue what you were trying to tell me.
Oh my gosh, where do I start? Okay, so again, I was on Sierra staff. I did Sierra coordinator. I was a SPOP staff member. I was a SPOP coordinator.
And SPOP was a student
parent orientation program.
Okay.
So I was a SPOP. That was the end of my freshman year, I believe. And then the end of my sophomore, junior, it was either freshman, sophomore, junior. I also was one of 5 SPOP coordinators. And you didn't see too many of those. So I had participated in SPOP. I wrote for the Blade newspaper. I've had a camera since I was 15. So not only did I write for the newspaper, I was a photographer. So I did a lot of photography, just for whomever. And I've shot pictures again since I was 15. I also participated I was involved in a gentleman organization. I was the first Black student to sit on the registration fee committee. And the reg fee committee was the one that allocated money out of student affairs. When you pay your registration fees, and they're the ones that allocate, here's what department's going to get this, so on and so forth. And there were just a few students on there, but I was the first Black student, if memory serves me correct, to sit on that. So I sat on the reg fee committee. I was on ASUCI student council, I think it's called student council. So I did that. What else did I do? Gosh. And there are probably a few other things that I did, just so many to think of, but a little bit of everything. I supported a lot of the VSU was on. And I sat on several search committees. We hired staff, so I got invited to sit on several search committees. One of the things I got to do, I got a chance to. We had a speaker, a gentleman, Julian Bond, who is I want to say a senator, I believe, out of Georgia. And Julian Bond came to campus to speak. And I got a chance, and I don't even know what role I was in, but I was the one that was allowed to take the university car and go pick him up from Orange County Airport. And I got a chance to spend a ton of time with him before he got to speak in front of I think it's called Fine Arts Hall, or the Fine Arts, whatever the big hall is in the Fine Arts building. I got a chance to spend a lot of time with him and talk with him about public speaking, about just everything. And he was working on issues from a national perspective. But so things like that happened. I also got a chance to sit down. There were about maybe a dozen of us. Minister Louis Farrakhan from the Nation of Islam came on campus, and I was one of a dozen students that was invited to sit down and talk with him.
I just want to pause for that one too. I mean, that's kind of major, right?
Exactly.
And I wonder, can you tell me more about who invited him, how you got to sit down and talk to Louis Farrakhan? Do you remember the year that happened?
That would have it was either sophomore or junior year. And he was invited, the Black Student Union actually, and I was part of that. And some of the upper class students we had just requested that we have more African-American speakers. And one of the speakers we wanted to hear from was Minister Louis Farrakhan. As controversial as he had been for a lot of different people, the university brought him on campus. And he spoke in, I want to say Crawford Hall, but I'm not sure. And Crawford Hall was the gym before there was the Brand Center. That's what it was. So Crawford Hall was the basketball gym, so on and so forth. So the students actually were instrumental in bringing him here and putting pressure on the administration to bring him here. And I was selected. They selected so many student leaders that were able to go. And some of it was done by the staff. Some of it was done by some of the senior student leaders, and I was one of the one that was fortunate enough to be able to sit down and talk with him and participate and just listen to him and, receive words of inspiration and motivation to continue doing what we were doing with regard to activism and improving ourselves academically.
Do you recall any of the major topics that students asked him about?
I recall students, just asking him about, where the world, not where the world was headed, but where we were headed as a country. Because at the time, we're talking late 70s, probably early 80s. So I remember students asking him a lot about, what was happening on a national level, where we were at, where did he think the world was going, what did he think was right, wrong, so on and so forth. I remember some questions about Malcolm X and his relationship with the Nation of Islam. Those are probably the primary talking points that I remember. He did probably most of the talking, and he talked about that. And, here's what, and just, I think he threw a lot of gas on a fire of encouragement of students to continue to excel and do well. And, you can excel and do well, but don't forget your culture. So that was where it was just really important. That was one of the things I think that those are the things that kind of stood out to me, so to speak.
Do you still happen to have your headphones?
I do. Let me plug them in. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
So that was one of the things, like I said, that we were able to see, was Louis Farrakhan being able to come to campus, and Julian Bond. He was probably the equivalent of who Stacey Abrams is now, for those that don't know. So, he was an assistant, I believe, not an assistant, but I know he worked with Dr. King a lot. He also worked a lot with Congress, the Senate, and the House. And so, and he was from Georgia, but he shared a very different perspective too on, and again, it was about motivating students, I think, and inspiring us to be the best we could be, but yet not to get our degrees and just move on, but to get our degrees and continue to give back.
We've got a list of activities that you've gone through that I don't even know if you did. You mentioned, did you catch them all? Did we capture them all? I know one question I wanted to follow up with you about was you keep mentioning Blade magazine. Did Blade stand for something? Was that an acronym?
No, not that I know of. I don't think there was an acronym for Blade. It was a newspaper that was already there, I think, when I came in as a freshman. And so one of the things that the upperclassmen did, they identified students, and they had and I don't know if it was intentional or it just kind of was happenstance, but they identified underclassmen that they wanted to work and continue the legacy that they had started. So they were into succession planning, and we didn't know it was succession planning. And so there wasn't necessarily an acronym. I do remember that we had and I think it was between the Blade and the BSU. We did have a saying, and these were actually our T-shirts, and it said "A luta continua," which is Swahili for "the struggle continues." And they were white T-shirts, and they had hands with chains on them, and the chains were breaking. So that was one of the things I do remember, and was influential. But it was nice. That was kind of, again, that time. So.
How did you have time for academics? Please enlighten us with, your time management skills. In all seriousness, though, we've been talking a lot about your social life and the contributions you've made to, the community in that way.
Right.
I'm, interested in also hearing about your academic experience. What did you major in?
I started in psychology, um, thinking that, maybe I'd want to be a psychologist again. Once I had realized, again, the dentistry thing was just not going to work for me. So I moved over to psychology. Um, and I enjoyed the interaction because again, our professor in the dorm class was a psychologist. And I remember taking a few classes in the School of Psych and Social Sciences that I really liked. So that for me was the academic journey that I kind of went down and thinking, okay, I could go do that. I could be a psychologist and so on and so forth. So the academic experience was different. I think on one hand, when I first started out, it was more challenging because everybody was an A student. So, when you leave at the top of your class in high school, which I was, near the top of my class, I left high school like that, but then you come here and you get that first paper back and you see all those red marks on it and a grade that's not so flattering. You look at it and you're like, wait a minute, is that an F or did they run out of ink and forget to bring the line down? So I kind of looked at it and I said, okay, you just have to work that much harder. And so academically, it was probably a little bit of a struggle for me because I was used to kind of breezing through and getting A's and B's, and if I didn't work hard, I could probably get a B easily in high school. Whereas here, you actually had to earn your grades. And so UC Irvine was a place academically where you had to earn your grades. So the academic experience it was fun though, because I enjoyed most of the classes. I mean, I know I had to take I think they're called breath requirements, and it's the equivalent of GE requirements. I know I had to take so many of those, but the professors, a nice thing about being a student at Irvine was that the upperclassmen kind of told you, well, if you got to take a class, if you've got to take this professor, they're going to make it more interesting. They'll make it more fun. They'll make it more, they'll make it something that you can enjoy. So you enjoy the experience. So academically, it was fun. I mean, it was great. I probably didn't put my best foot forward. I did well, but I could have done better. But I also spent a lot of time in non-academic activities, and so even though I realized, okay, if you got to be average, you're not killing them, but you're not necessarily hurting yourself. I wasn't sure whether I was going to go to graduate school, but I also know that I enjoyed being in leadership positions. I enjoyed the non-academic part of the experience as much as I did the academic part of the experience. So I tried to just keep a balance between the two. And one of the things that helped me, I think I mentioned earlier about time management, it opened my world. It was just, you realize you get 24 hours in a day, but when I realized how much time I was actually wasting, then it just allowed me to go to a different place in terms of activities I could be involved in, because it was like, okay, what's important, what's not important, how are you going to balance this, how are you going to balance that? So I took the class or the time management exercise literally. And so I was able to squeeze, as they say, 65, 70 minutes out of an hour sometimes. So academically, it was fun. I mean, it was hard at first, but as I got more toward junior and senior year, it became a little bit easier. And then I also took a lot of classes I also took some, not a lot, but I took the classes, particularly that we had Black professors offer, that were culturally exciting. They talked about things that were relevant to you. So those kind of classes were different because, it's different from statistics or science or language or something like that, but it was talking about things that were about your history. So, I realized I excelled a lot in those classes, and those classes became easier to me. But it was also because of my involvement, I think, in campus. And then I learned as a student, for me, I was not the strongest test taker, but if I had a pencil and paper, I could write and document everything I needed to document, and I could do just as well as anybody else. But if you ask me just to memorize these 1,000 questions or 100 questions and give you multiple choice, that was going to be probably my weakness. But if you ask me to write about it, that would be my strength.
Could you tell me more about kind of the the classes and the faculty members that you found inspirational or motivational or mentors? I mean, you mentioned that there were some classes taught by Black professors that you enjoy. Can you tell me more about those?
Yeah, there's a few. I mean, the classes that stick out to me. Um, One was called 50K, which was taught by Art Lang and Janet Loxley, who are white professors. But it just taught you all about the psychology of dealing with yourself, about controlling, instead of saying, so and so, Crystal made me mad. No, you opted to become mad based on what Crystal's activity was. And it taught me a lot about that. So that was probably one of the most intriguing classes. And then I learned a lot about um, one of the professors I had was Dr. Rick Turner, and he was a director of tutoring. But Dr. Turner also talked about, I remember the book was called The Destruction of Black Civilization by E. Chancellor Williams, I believe. And he talked a lot about our history. So I remember taking his class and learning a lot, and a few classes. Every class he had, I probably took. Dr. Horace Mitchell, one of the other things I did, activities I did that I didn't mention was Dr. Mitchell came when I was a sophomore, I believe, and somebody connected us. He was an assistant to the vice chancellor, something like that. He wasn't the vice chancellor, but he was an assistant. And the vice chancellor connected us. And I ended up doing an internship under Dr. Mitchell for probably at least 2 years, I think. Um, I just learned so much about everything. I was
What
kind of
was
like, what?
the internship for?
It was an independent study. And so the internship was just kind of learning about, the structure of not the structure, but how the university functioned. For me, I think Dr. Mitchell really he prepared me for the work world. He was the one that made the transition. He and probably Dr. Turner, those three, and Dr. Loxley too, they probably helped me transition from being a student, no matter how outspoken I was, they helped me transition to here's what to expect in the work world. And as I say, they took the raw John with the rust on them and they polished me up and made sure that when I got out, I was going to be successful. So, my hat's off to the three of them. So those were the two Black professors and also the non-Black professor that I would say I have the highest respect for, because their commitment to students was unwavering as far as I was concerned. And I got I had the beauty of being able to work with all of them, and just learn. So it wasn't an internship for a specific field, but it was an internship, just kind of like a special assistant to it was a pass, no pass. I was just getting credits to fill credits, but it was a learning process, and I could talk about things like sitting on the Reg Fee committee and what are the politics and, of doing this and doing that. Or when I was on search committees and we were hiring professionals, what do you think about this? And what do you think about this? We need more Black women. We need Black women professionals, I should say. We need this. What are your thoughts? And I had the best of the best in terms of the people I had in front of me as mentors.
Was it a particular program that you were, or organization that you were a part of that allowed you to participate in the search process for hiring?
I probably got asked, or I don't think it was a particular organization, but I was president of the BSU, so that didn't hurt any. I also, now that I think about it, I also was co-founder. We had something called I think it was called the Black Student Union Student Coordinating something. And it was the BSU from several campuses, state and UC. And I remember meeting a professor, Amin Ra, down at Cal State Long Beach. So we got to interact with other campuses and see what other campuses were doing. And so, in my position of leadership, I just got asked, several times to, do you have time? Are your grades okay? And they check your grades. Are you okay to sit on this committee? Or do you want to participate in this or this activity, so on and so forth? So I think they kind of they remind me of my parents in that when I said earlier that my parents kept me involved in activities, they kept me involved in activities, and they knew the more they threw at me, and again, they made sure that I was doing okay academically. It wasn't going to affect me that way, but they knew the more they threw at me, the better it would make me long-term down the road as a professional. So I got asked to, again, and I participated in a ton of activities.
You had such an incredibly full experience, or at least that's the way it sounds.
It was
at UCI, and I wonder if there were if you reflect on kind of any challenges that you faced there, how you overcame them. What were your challenges and how did you overcome them, if there were any? You mentioned academics a little bit, but
yeah, absolutely, there were challenges. I think academically the challenges were just balancing the time, and the way you overcome that is you have to realize that no matter what, your first and foremost priority is your academics. Without academics, you're not there. So that was an easy fix, so to speak. It was an easy balance. Just remember, this is your focal point. And I also had all my mentors, the ones that I just mentioned, they made sure that they kept that in front of you. This is why you're here. So keep that in front of you. But other challenges on a non-academic level had to do with dealing with people that have differences of opinions. And so the question becomes, how do you deal with it? For me, we can disagree without being disagreeable is the philosophy that I was raised with. And we don't have to see eye to eye, but again, we have to find the common denominators that we have. So how I dealt with the challenges were sometimes they're not going to be resolvable. You're not going to get through them. Other times you have to realize we just agree to disagree, and it's okay. It doesn't impact our relationship. That it shouldn't, I should say. Theoretically, it shouldn't impact our relationship that negatively that we fall out about it. It's just, okay, this is the way you see it. This is the way I see it. It's like being a fan of a sports team, and this is my team and this is your team, and who's right or wrong? Both and neither. So that's how I kind of dealt with the challenges academically, is not letting it come between us, but finding a common ground that we could work together on.
What year did you graduate?
I graduated in 1981. Surprisingly, right?
Yeah. Tell me about graduation and graduation activities.
Oh gosh. The one activity that sticks out for me is, graduation was fun. It was over. The one activity that probably sticks out the most is we had at the time what was called the Black Awards Banquet. And it was a banquet of 4 Black students put on by Black faculty and staff and some of the Black students. And they recognized all the graduating seniors. They gave out awards, so on and so forth. And it was I can't remember the name of the hotel, but it was across from the airport there on MacArthur Boulevard. So I'm not sure what the name of it is, but we were at the hotel there, and I went to it all 4 years. So, graduation was fun because as an undergraduate before my senior year, one of the things I did was I did the video show for the graduation, because being a photographer, we didn't have video, so to speak. We did slideshows. That's what it was. So I'd go out and I'd have pictures from all over campus, and we do slideshows at graduation and show kind of the school year, whatever else we were showing. And in my senior year, I don't remember if I did the slideshow, but it was just an outstanding activity. We got a chance to get dressed up, to see all our peers. We knew that this was, quote unquote, the end, so to speak, because we weren't going to be seeing each other on campus as much. But we were all going our merry way, whatever that may be, academically, whether you're going to school, in the work world, going home, whatever the case may be. I was named the outstanding graduating Black senior in my senior year. So that was outstanding. And then graduation itself was just fun. I still have pictures. I was looking at some pictures recently of myself graduating, and us all hugging each other and, laughing and joking and just smiling to be done. It's an achievement, that we made it through in 4 years or 5 years, whatever the time. I made it through in 4, but some people took longer. Some people took shorter, but whatever it was, the fact that you graduated, that was a major accomplishment. So that was just a day of celebration, is my memory of graduation.
And what did you do after you graduated?
So after I graduated, I realized that there were not 5,000 jobs sitting there waiting for you, just calling you and telling you, here, come here, make this much money, blah, 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 blah. So that did not happen. So I had prepared a little bit for graduation. Again, not, as I always said as a student, I thought I wanted to be a psychologist. And then my thing was, I remember telling Jim Craig, who was a housing director, I don't know what I want to do when I grow up, but hopefully I'll never grow up and I'll figure it out. But knowing that, I was working, I think I might have been working in fast food or something part-time. And then I started job hunting. So I said, I'm going to wait on school. I'm going to job hunt. And the funniest thing happened. I was job hunting. I went to interviews, and you'd get to an interview and, everything was good. I had a resume that was unlike anybody else's. I checked all the boxes as far as I had my degree. I had way more activity and student involvement than most students. And I don't know what it was, but for whatever reason, I'd seem to not get hired. So I said, okay, that's fine. We'll just keep trying, don't give up. And I remember getting a call for an interview, and it was for a bank. It was a management program at Security Pacific National Bank. And it was probably 90 plus degrees. And I figured it was like the previous interviews I had been on. And someone had recommended me for this program because I applied for a job at the bank. And I was working as a temporary employee. And this lady recommended me. And so I got a call to go in. And I figured it was another BS interview, so to speak. So I went in, of course, first time I did not have a suit, a tie on. I was not prepared, dressed professionally, I should say. So I went in kind of business casual and went in to interview and thinking again, it was just, I was going through the routine, and the woman ended up hiring me. So, so that was my experience in terms of getting into the work world. And she said, you'll stay down here as a temporary employee, and the management program starts in September. And I worked in the Newport Beach branch of Security Pacific Bank. And then I think when I went to the training program, I believe it was between Long Beach and somewhere in Orange County. It might have been Irvine. So that's where I started. I started in a management program, and you either had to have a degree to get into the program, or you had to have so many years of experience within banking to get into the program. So after college, that was my first experience in the work world, my first real experience. I'd worked part-time jobs here and there, but this was my first real job, so to speak. And it was a full-time job, and it was great.
And since, and what is your professional career currently?
So I'm a mortgage lender now. So if I had to sum up my work experience, I stayed at Security Pacific for a few years, moved up to assistant vice president, manager, whatever the title was. And then I got recruited and hired by First Interstate Bank. Mm-hmm. So I went over to another bank, one of their competitors, went over there and worked over there for a while. Ended up getting married at the time, married that same young lady that I had asked to start the Black Student Union with me. I ended up marrying her. So she and I got married.
What's her name?
Her real name is Evalyn, but no one calls her that. She's known as Sugar Frazier. So, and we were in the dorms together. We've known each other since 77 when we came in. And our role, the funny thing is, every time there was a debate over whether it be capital punishment, abortion, I just know I wanted to be opposite her, because we could debate each other all day long, no matter what the topic was. You could take pro, I could take con, vice versa. It didn't matter. It was a good debate partner. And so And when we started the Black Student Union, she was my buddy then, but we never dated. So we were the best of friends, literally. But that was it. And so we ended up dating, I think, 1987. So we had been best friends for 10 years. And then we finally went on not finally, but we went on a date. I was helping her mother with a loan, as a matter of fact. And so her mother was buying a house, and it went from there to 6 months later, we were married. Now we just celebrated 34 years of marriage. So in a 6 month relationship, 6 months, 7 months, something like that. So
congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. So I left the bank, going back to that, I left the bank, went over to First Interstate. Like I said, I got married, was with some friends, and one of the people that had recruited me, and he was into mortgage lending, and I was doing really well professionally, but he was into mortgage lending, and he said, do you want to try this mortgage thing? And I said, what's the big difference? And it was commission only. So I made the transition of going from a salary to commission only. And, I took about 6 months, maybe a year, to prepare myself to do it. And they said, worst case is you can always come back and become a branch manager again. And so I left the safety and security and I was a branch manager at that time at First Interstate in West Garden Grove. And so I left there and I went into just mortgage lending, became a loan officer, and went to commission only, and never looked back since. And that was, I got married in 88. That was probably 92 or so. So yeah, it's probably been about 30 years, because I've had 40 years in the business. But I just never looked back, and I did everything. And I worked for a couple different companies. I even ran my own company for a while. I've done management. Obviously, you have to. I've been a manager, and then I decided I didn't like. I'm not gonna say I didn't like. I like helping people more than managing. So I had done everything from managed staffs of 7 to 10 to managing staffs of 35. And I really liked the enjoyment of being able to be a mortgage professional and actually provide more service. So again, I went back to my time management and said, do I want to spend more time doing the supervisory management things, or do I want to spend more time being a lender and being able to provide knowledge, expertise, and experience that can help people move to the next level? And I chose the latter.
Thank you for sharing.
Sure.
What is your current relationship with UC Irvine?
Wow. With UC Irvine, as of today, I'm on the, I think I'm the treasurer, and I forget because I don't really look at the titles, right? But I've been with the UC Irvine Black Alumni Board since right after they started. It was probably a year or two after they started. But ironically, I just found, and this was really funny, last weekend, I think, or 2 weeks ago, my wife and I were cleaning out some stuff. I actually was one of the ones, well, two things. One is I was a guest speaker, and when we had the reunion, there was a presentation put on by the library, and it was all the historical facts and information and data they had gathered. And one of the things I found in there was, and it reminded me, I was a guest speaker at one of the Black Awards banquets years ago, way back when. I mean, before I got married. So, I've always been just stayed in touch, and I believed in networking. So my doctor, my dentist, they're all UC Irvine alums. Professionally, oh my gosh, I network and interact with so many different people that are alums. So that's kind of been my relationship. And then ironically, like I was starting to allude to, 2 weeks ago, we were cleaning out the garage, and we found out we were actually involved in the first, and I remembered we were involved in the first reunion, the first Black family reunion in 1993, because we found the sign-in sheet or the book. And to give you an idea of when it was, there were no emails. There were just names, phone numbers, addresses, classes, so on and so forth. But that was before emails. And I'm like, wow, that means we've been doing this for 29 years. We've been doing reunions, and I've been involved in every reunion since. So my experience has been, even though the alumni had just started, I had been involved as an active alumni since at least 93, and even before that, because I spoke before I got married. So that was probably 85, 86, something like that. I'd have to go look it up. So that's been my experience as an alumni.
Wow.
Kind of mirrors my activity as an undergraduate.
Yeah, definitely sounds like it. Definitely sounds like it. We've covered so many topics this afternoon. Was there anything that you wanted to speak about that we didn't get to?
Not that I can think of, not that I can think of. I just wanted to share my story and, and kind of follow your lead and share hopefully something and encourage students to stay the path, stay the course, and things work out. We're, as my wife and I near retirement, and we've talked about it. We're trying to make our plans to do that. It's I wouldn't trade in the experience for anything. My kids, we have 3 children, so that would be the one thing I'd say is, as a parent, it's funny when you're a student. I told someone the other day, I was telling my kids, I said, when I was 20, 30 was, you were kind of up there. 40, yeah. And I said, when you get to 50 or 60, I said, you had one foot in the grave and another one on a banana peel, right? So then now I look at it and I go back and I'm like, wow, 50 and 60 isn't really so bad, right? Those are good numbers. So, but when I was a kid or younger or whatever, I used to always say to my parents, oh, those are just those old folks thinking, talking, and so on and so forth. But I'm those old folks now, so so it's fun now. I mean, it's different. I'm seeing the transition of being the skills I use, the skills I learned, my wife and I learned at Irvine, we're able to share them with our children. And so the legacy of Irvine continues, even though my kids didn't go to school at Irvine. Um, Irvine still lives within them, and they're able to see, these are relationships you guys have had for well over 40 years. That's phenomenal. And so, one of my kids was in somewhere just recently and he said, "You're John Elston's daughter." She said, "I'm sorry, who?" She said, he said, "I'm so and so, so and so." And he called her out by name and she was like, "Ooh, it's a good thing I wasn't acting up." He said, "You're right, because I'd have called your dad." So said, "I know your dad and your mom," and blah, 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 blah. So, so that would be the one thing I'd say. It's been a blast. If I had to do it over again, I wouldn't change a thing. Not one thing.
If you had to give a few words of wisdom about how the Black community can, and I am talking about faculty, staff,
Right.
students, you know, affiliates can thrive at the university, um, what would you say? Or how the university can support that community to allow them to thrive, or to support them in thriving?
I would say a few things. I would say number one, as a student, make the most of your experience. You don't realize how much fun you're having until you're out of there. So make the most of it. Your academics is first and foremost, but make the most of it. The second thing I would say to any student would be give back. As my mother used to say, pay it forward. Um, Reach out and help someone. It just, um, from a biblical standpoint, she used to always say, what goes around comes around, is ready to give to receive and all that. But that's true. It's so I've lived it. So I can say in all honesty, um, give back. There's nothing like it. It's the feeling of, it's not about what you get out of it, but it's helping someone else. And when you do, it comes back to you tenfold. And you don't do it for that purpose, but it just does. So that would be the thing I would say to any student would be, give back and make the most of your experience. As far as a university, I would say help our young people build their community. The students today have more technology. They have things that we don't have. We had typewriters and so on and so forth, but their skill set is great. And so my advice would be help them build a community, help them help themselves, just help them become better students and better people. It works well, and it makes the university look good, not good, but great, because um, I'm proud of the fact that I am in charge of a program called Health and Wellness: A Black Perspective. And I don't know if you've heard of it, but um, we're doing it through the Black Alumni chapter. And my vision was I wanted to bring back only UC Irvine Black graduates in a wide array of fields to come back and volunteer and help and give something back to the community. So we do webinars every other month. We started last year. We did one on COVID. We had 4 phenomenal physicians, and we went to education. We had 4 or 5 phenomenal educators, and it's open to students, staff, faculty, community members, alumni, whoever wants to come. The only caveat is we only allow Black alumni to teach it. So I've been able to tap into my network along with 2 of my other board members that work with me on it. So we've tapped into our network of resources, and we're able to bring back Black alumni. The 3rd one we did was on mental health, and I learned so much from mental health professionals, just helping you. It reiterated what I had heard years ago, but helping you balance mental health. And then the one that was last year, and then the one we did this year, I actually did one on with a young man that's a 2018 graduate, I believe, and we did something on finance, the road to $1 million. I talked about finance and budgeting, and he talked about investing and so on and so forth. And so, again, those are the things I would say where you want to continue to give back. The university, I think for me at least, support those activities and encourage that. We have, as far as I'm concerned, as my buddy used to say, we have a gold mine of talent when you look at the Black alumni at Irvine. And he said, Harvard has nothing on UCI, trust me. And so, and I've seen it. So I've seen it firsthand. I'm a member of it. And, again, so if I had to give some words of advice, it would be, support the students, help them be great. The first Black woman president is someone that could come out of Irvine. The president of LAUSD went to Irvine. The district attorney for the county of LA went to Irvine. A lot of great Irvine people. It's a great institution. It's not easy. It's challenging, but it's the reward is just there. And again, I'd say give something back.
Thank you, John. My last question for you is, if you could describe your UCI experience in 3 words, what would they be?
Challenging, rewarding, lifetime.
It has been an absolute pleasure speaking with you and getting to know more about your experience at UCI. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. I appreciate you asking me. It's been a pleasure.